Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. And so I was listening to, of course, the UN, United Nations travesty show yesterday, which was basically amounted to 3 hours of hypocrisy. They talked about bringing war criminals to justice while sitting in front of a long list of known war criminals right there in the room. And Russia made a great case for why it feels threatened. Now, again, I don't support any country invading any other country and waging war. But where was the UN when Russia wanted to be heard about their grievances? The atrocities, the infringement, the encroachment, the aggression. Now, we're going to get into a little bit of that today in pretty high detail. And we're going to start with a little bit of inconvenient history. Now, it didn't take much digging to find this because it's right there in plain sight. Because TinPut, we're going to call him, and maybe Mark can or Tom can put a glossary of terms in the pinned comment for us so that we can see what we're talking about. We have to use coded language. But basically, what we have is TinPut saying that his main justification for his war on StewCrain is about safety concerns over infiltration of StewCrain's leadership by Patsy, we'll call them, extremists. Now, here's what history tells us. This was March 2018. And even back then, they were talking about a problem with the Patsies, right? And this is crazy because what they're saying here is extremists, it's so hard to use the code words, make sure I use them. TinPut says the extremists are punishing Russian people in the Far East Ukraine, right? For even speaking the language, persecuting them, killing them for simply being Russian. Now, here's the problem, and we have to ask ourselves, is TinPut correct in what he's saying? Well, let's first read what the media is saying about his claims, and then we'll read what history told us in news reports during that era, during that time frame. So right here, this is 3 days ago, StewCrain conflict, Russian forces attack from 3 sides. And in here, the president of StewCrain outright denies the claim that there is any Patsy problem in his country, Patsy extremist problem in his country. And he states in here that he is descended from the word that rhymes with bluish and therefore incapable of supporting a Patsy military. Here's his quote here. He says he'd been asked how people who lost 8 million of its own citizens fighting the Patsies could support Patsyism. How could I be a Patsy? Said Zelensky, the president, who himself is bluish. Now, here's what's at play here. He doesn't have control of his military in the way that he wants the world to believe that he does, because he was a person that was inserted into his position. He didn't have the full support of these people. And this is what happens when countries interfere with other people's business. Then you get a situation where the wrong person is put in and that person doesn't have the full support of the people or doesn't have true power. It's just a face or a name. And this could be the case of what's going on here. So let's read what Reuters said back in 2018 about the Patsy problem in Ukraine. This was 2018, March 19th. And let's read this. Now, this was before he got in office. He came in office the following year. And before we read this, understand that StewCrain government was set up by a U.S.-led coup, or at least that's the assertion. Bo Mama, in his own words, seemed to admit that. He said the government that we put in place. Now, he has walked back that comment, saying that he was misinterpreted by what he really meant, but the Rushkins caught him saying it and said, look, he said in his own words that they were involved. And to a certain degree, they were, but they said they were involved in setting up free elections. So, the question becomes, why would the U.S. defend a country whose military is highly infiltrated like this? Let's read this. Again, this is Reuters, a supposedly reputable news source, right? As StewCrain struggles against Russia and its proxy continues, Kiev must also contend with growing problem behind the front lines. Far-right vigilantes who are willing to use intimidation and even violence to advance their agendas, and who often do so with tacit approval of law enforcement agencies. So they're saying it right here. Look at this. Oh, but TinPut is, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's making all this up. Let's keep reading here. A January 28th demonstration in Kiev by 600 members of the so-called National Militia, a newly formed ultra-nationalist group that vows to use force to establish order, illustrates this threat. While the group's Kiev launch was peaceful, national military members in Balaklavas stormed a city council meeting in central Ukrainian town of Cherkasy. Many of the national militia's members come from that movement. We'll call it the Voza movement because that's that backwards. And so here this article goes on to basically prove that there is a problem. 30-odd privately funded volunteer battalions. This is exactly what TinPut was talking about. That in the early days of the war helped the regular army to defend StewCrainian territory against Russia's separatist proxies. And this is probably the resistance that Russia is talking about, that they're dealing with. And these people are involved in war crimes against peoples. Now, from Russia's side, they're saying about 15,000 people got taken out by these people. Now, there's always two sides of the story, but you're getting the rest of the story here, because all we seem to get in our mainstream media is one-sided reporting. Nobody wants to tell the other side. They'd be better off if they told both sides of the story and let people decide for themselves what was going on. But instead, we get news through one side of the story. So, then they talk about Crimea, of course, and separatists there. Now, it's crazy because, look at this, they're radicalizing the children. All right here in this Reuters article. Using wooden pop sticks, training them to be extremists. Now, let's keep reading here. Because apparently there was violence against the BGTL community. Now, I thought that the New World Order was all about protecting these people. But apparently, that's not the case when it comes to these Patsies in the StewCrain stirring up a bunch of drama. Because they have been going against these people and taking them out. Vigilantism, they're talking about, and all these meetings that they're holding, rallies. So, now let's keep reading here. Now this situation is a bit complex, so I want to make sure that I'm, communicating this to you correctly, because it is a bit of a complex situation. There's a lot of history here. And they're, Russia and what they're doing is just the latest in the tit for tat that's been going on, okay? This has been going on for decades, actually. As NATO has encroached into Russia's territory. Now, let's keep reading here because there's even more, because here they even deny that TinPut is correct in his assessment of the situation, but the entire article pretty much confirms that he was right. StewCrain is not the only country that must contend with a resurgent far right, but Kiev's recent efforts to incorporate independent armed groups into its regular armed forces, as well as continuing national sense of indebtedness to the militias for their defense of the homeland, makes addressing the ultra-nationalist threat considerably more complicated than it is elsewhere. So basically they're allowing these people to exist, which is total hypocrisy based on what these people stand for, or what they say they stand for. And then it says right here, to be clear, the Kremlin's claim that StewCrain is a hornet's nest of fascists are false. Far-right parties performed poorly in the last parliamentary elections. Well, I don't believe in the reports that they give us on the elections, so that doesn't mean anything to me. The whole rest of the article proves that, in fact, there is a problem in their military, and that it is affecting the Russian nationals who live in those areas. They're being basically threatened, taken out, abused, whatever you want to call it. So here's some proof, right, that they admitted to the problem. But now all of a sudden you look in the media and you can't find this detailed history of the Patsies in the Ukraine. You have to look back in time. Now I found this by looking back into like, I just typed in a Google search and I put a date in there, and then I was able to pull all this up. And you could do the same thing, but I'll put a link for this for you guys. Look at this. Even Liz Reel is chiming in here all the way back in 2014. They were talking about this. This is the Post here. Regional police head accused of neo-Patsy ties. November 12th, 2014. And so this is a problem. Now here's where things get weird. How is it that the president of StewCrain is bluish? That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, it kind of does. We can't talk about that. We can't talk about how a bluish person would be running cover for Yahtzees in his own country. Now, who's really responsible for 80% of the aggression in the past 80 years? That would be America. And it took the Chinese embassy to actually bring this fact to the forefront. A country who were always all over about human rights and aggression, and they're the ones that reveal the truth. Among 248 armed conflicts that occurred in 153 regions across the world, from 1945 to 2001, 201 were initiated by the U.S. That's 81% of the total. And we covered a little bit of this on yesterday's show. But if you didn't make yesterday's show, here is the list. Starting after WW2 to the present, 80%. Here's all of the places that we dropped ordnance throughout the decades. It never stopped. Every single year it appears. It's like we didn't even know what to do with all these arms. It's like we had to use them. And this is a sickening feeling when you're an American and you live here, like myself. You begin to wonder. Some of us are just coming to this realization. Others of us have been here for quite some time. And we know what America really is. Now, here's what I think's really going on. I think that StewCrain is the breadbasket for Europe. As it says here, producers in Europe fear the Ukraine crisis may result in rising prices of items such as bread, baked goods, and beer that may be passed on to the consumers. StewCrain is called the breadbasket of Europe for good reason. It accounts for 12% of the global wheat exports, 16% of corn, and 18% of barley. So about 20% average of all the grain in Europe comes from StewCrain. So what I'm thinking is happening here is that Europe is trying to secure that grain by absorbing StewCrain into NATO so that they can have long-lasting security of their food source, right? And I think that TinPut saw that he couldn't let this happen on his doorstep. Why? Because the U.S. is the ringleader of NATO. And with our track record, he would be a fool to allow U.S.-backed Europe to thrive on his borders, especially given all the bases all throughout NATO. Here they are right here, you guys, the NATO bases. Every blue dot you see on this screen is a U.S. military base. The red is Russia, and here's StewCrain right in the middle. And as you can see that as these countries start joining NATO, then they fill up with U.S. bases. I mean, what is that about? Here's the map here. In 1949, just these dark areas were NATO, how NATO expanded eastwards. Then in 1952, you add Spain and this country. Is this Germany? I think that's Germany. And this down here, further encroaching on Russia. Then in 1999, all these blue countries got added to NATO. I mean, this has just been an ongoing thing. And now they got their eyes set on StewCrain. And you really, again, I don't approve of a country invading another country, but what were they supposed to do? Bases with short range nukes on many of these bases all throughout Europe. You can look all this up. I'm not making any of this up. And to counter Russia. Now, I don't know how the New World Order fits into all this. I've heard murmurings that, that the NATO alliance is the New World Order and Russia is not. But I'm not so sure Russia is not either. I'm not so sure they're not either. I think they're all part of it. Now, if there were absolutely no bases, no U.S. bases in Europe, let's go back to the base map here. You can see this. If there were absolutely no U.S. bases in Europe, then TinPut would have no justification for its fears, would he? But as you can see on this map, they're all over. Now, what would happen? And what's the real problem here? Well, we know that the U.S. is leading NATO. So and our rhetoric has just been threatening toward Russia over the last several decades, hasn't it? And we know that if StewCrain became part of NATO, they would just fill up with bases, just like the rest of Europe. And it's too close for comfort for Russia. This is why you see some of these other world powers, India, China, not getting on board with the cancel culture on TinPut. But look at all the virtue signaling going on in America against Russia. It's crazy. They're canceling their vodka. They're canceling everything about it. There are players in sports that won't play the Russians. I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. This is the world we live in now, where people, get on their high horse. They barely know any information about what's really happening. All they get are a couple sentences of a headline, and then they just join right in, right? And look how quickly it happened. They didn't even wait to see what was really going on. They didn't even wait to see and hear Russia's side of the story. And this is the kind of emotional virtue signaling that causes people to do really strange things, like run out and get a Pokemon sticker just to make a point, just to oppose the other side. And this is how they play us. And it's sad. This is what causes people to join a military. voluntarily going. It's all based on emotion and virtue signaling. So who's really expanding here? Who is really the threat? Well, it's the US, isn't it? And NATO. Has Russia encroached back? Not like we have. I think Crimea was the only one, really. Might have been a few other instances, but look at the land grab here. Now, what do you think is going to happen when we guarantee security for these countries and send weapons in there? Well, obviously the industrial complex grows, military industrial complex, the profits, all these companies, all these American companies that make these weapons. And every time you invest in those companies, you're basically helping the machine grow even more. And then what happens? Those all get sent over into these countries, right? And then these countries owe us something, don't they? There's some kind of deal struck. We're not just giving these weapons away. We're getting something back for it. And whatever we're getting back, it's very profitable for us. And this is the industrial complex. And this is why you should never mix the two. War should not be a business. It should be a necessity. It should be very controlled in the way that what's spent on it, and so on and so forth. But here we are in the middle of this. So here is the deeper truths behind this. Now, you've probably heard a lot of what I'm saying already, but some of you haven't heard this. So this has to be about the New World Order and forcing Russia deeper into it. Or it has to do with the grains or resources of StewCrain for Europe. And it might be a little bit of both. A little bit of both. Now, what does what's going on in the StewCrain have to do with our food prices? Well, as we get into some of these headlines, shouldn't have anything to do with it, right? We're not the ones getting food from StewCrain or Russia. Well, Bo Jiven apparently has a crystal ball, and he knows that both our food and gas prices will continue to rise. Let's read this, and then we'll get into some more of the other headlines today as well. Let me go back in the chat, make sure you guys are with me. Okay, very good. Let's get into this article here. Russia's invasion of StewCrain will likely ratchet American food prices even higher. Now, for those of you that get triggered, because these are all Yahoo articles, because some do. This is not a Yahoo article. Yahoo is a portal of articles from bigger news sources. This is the Washington Post. Let me zoom it in for you, because some people got triggered. Try to discredit the channel saying, you trust Yahoo? I don't trust any of these news sources. We're here actually reading between the headlines. Even if it was a Yahoo article, we're reading between the headlines. We're trying to figure out what these people are up to, what they're going to try to force us to do. And I think we did a pretty good job of it over the last 3 years, anticipating what was going to happen with the spamdemic, for instance. We told you guys this wasn't going to stop, that all their headlines were basically pointing toward an endless, booster after booster after booster, forcing people, losing rights. And that's exactly what happened, wasn't it? For mandates. So I think we did a pretty good job of reading between the headlines. Now, let's get back on track here. Read about our food and gas prices going through the roof. Russia's invasion of the StewCrain could push U.S. food prices even higher, as the region is one of the world's largest producers of wheat and some vegetable oils. And the disruptions could drag on for months or even years, as crop production in the area could be halted and take a long time to restart. Okay, you still haven't told us how that fits into the United States. The new inflation shock comes at a time when global markets remain extremely strained because of the spamdemic-related disruptions. The price changes impacted commodity prices in recent days, could flow through to higher costs. So this is all the speculative market. It has nothing to do with an actual shortage for us. It's all speculation. Grocery manufacturers are concerned that while the vast majority of ingredients and materials for American products are sourced domestically, see, they admit it right there, the economic effects of Russia's invasion of the StewCrain will be global, according to Katie Dennis, Vice President of Communications of, I don't know what I'm talking about. We're already seeing energy prices rise and commodities futures for wheat and corn spike. See, it's all speculation in futures. That's going to prompt concern when costs to make and ship goods continue to set records and consumer demand continues to be above levels not seen since March of 2020. There's no slack in the system, making weathering disruption significantly more difficult. So what this is really code for is because we're in bed with NATO and their grain markets drop, guess what we're going to do? We're going to start shipping grain over to Europe. Oh, joy. So that all our prices get to go up. That's what this really means, you guys. That's what this really means. Also, that we could have some missiles sitting on the borders of Russia and continue to increase the profitability of our military industrial complex. Do you see how it's the little people that always get in trouble? We're always the ones that catch the raw end of the deal. Consumers will start seeing rising prices in anything that has grain in it. Wheat, corn, oats, barley, rye, because the grain markets are all tied to each other. Why are they tied to each other? What a dumb plan. Why would you tie all the grain markets together so that when something happens in one part of the world, it's going to affect people in the other part of the world? That makes no sense. You know, the first thing they tell you in investment is diversify your portfolio. Well, this ain't a very diversified portfolio, is it? That could mean higher prices on bread, beer, cereal, animal feed, among other things, impacting billions of dollars worth of products. Animal feed, that means our meat's going to go up. It's already $20 for a steak. It's going to cost $40 next year. Unbelievable. I won't buy this stuff. I get to the point I'll subsist on I don't care if I have to sweep the floor and make gravy out of it. I'm not going to give in to these people's this manipulation of the economy. This is just unbelievable. In a situation where the whole supply chain is already stressed, if the conflict goes on more than a couple weeks, you will start to see an impact on food prices. Key food commodity prices hit their highest point in nearly a decade on Friday. So here's the future, you guys. They're getting you ready for it. The same applies to gas prices. They're using the same justification, right? Anything that happens to any part of the world always it affects us as well. And why do you think that happens? Because we're headed toward a global economy. This is what they always wanted. This is the New World Order. There is no, our country's safe because we didn't play ball. We're all tied into one another now. We're all tied into one another. Now, this next story, this really illustrates how much power the U.S. has over the world. Now, this kind of shocked me. I wasn't really aware that we had this much power. I thought it was a little bit spread out, but look at this. We truly are the head of the snake as they try to bully every other country in the world against Russia. Does this all sound familiar? Remember the coalition-led force in Rak? They want us to believe now that TinPut is a very evil man. Like Saddam Hussein. Let's read this. These countries have disgraced themselves in blocking Russian sanctions. Oh, a disgrace. Unbelievable. As StewCrain buckles under Russia's brutal invasion. I can think of a lot more brutal invasions that have been going on our end. The worst military bloodshed in European history since the end of WW2. Oh, okay. So let's put in the Mideast in this sentence, and we could say that's the worst in history. It's just funny how they ignore these simple facts, right? Hours after the invasion began, the European Commission president promised massive sanctions. But it was soon clear that Russia's tentacles are deeply embedded in Europe's strongest economies. That punish TinPut will come at a high price. Italy has asked that luxury goods so dear to the oligarchs in Russia be excluded. Germany pushed for an exemption. So just because these countries asked for exemptions, they got shamed, right? Shamed by America. Thought we weren't supposed to shame people. Notice hypocrisy here. Same thing going on in China. Pressure's on there to stand against Russia. Now, Russia is not going to do that. They're largely remaining kind of neutral. They're not saying one way or the other, but behind the scenes, they're probably working with Russia to try to get this situation under control. All right. But China doesn't like this either. They don't want NATO pushing in, pressing in on them. So what? So they can make rules, New World Order rules, and pressure China, get them dependent, and then threaten to do the same thing to them, sanction them if they don't play ball. I mean, when's this going to end? And understand, this has all been spoken about in the Bible. This aggression, these kings fighting one another, trying to get other kings involved and to play ball who might not want to play ball or might not want to join the New World Order. This is what they're doing. This is what it's been all about as long as I've been alive. So that's what's going on. We'll move on from that whole situation over there. Get into some other topics, some other headlines here. Here's an update on that mystery outbreak in New Brunswick, Canada. Now, I think one of our brothers here is from New Brunswick. I think he chimed in a couple days ago, so he'll be interested to hear this story. Apparently, I think he was the one that actually sent this to me too. They're trying to claim now that there is no mystery neurological illness. The committee finds. Here's where you get into conflict of interest. You can't let the very people who are trying to cover something up be the ones to determine if there was an outbreak or not. So, the answer is there is no outbreak. What? So what happened to these people? Let's read a little bit about this. Some patients unhappy with findings call for more scientific investigation from the province. Good luck with that. Let's read it. See what's going on down here. Look at this lady, straight-faced. There is no illness. Walk of shame. Let's read this. Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Jennifer Russell, told reporters on Thursday that people in the cluster are sick from known neurological illnesses. Let's get this in frame here. Almost 1 year after New Brunswick government sounded the alarm about a distinct atypical neurological syndrome causing symptoms ranging from muscle spasms to visual hallucinations, the province now says there is no mystery neurological syndrome. That comes after an oversight committee made up of primarily neurologists from New Brunswick reviewed records from 48 patients who are part of a cluster and found that while some have unusual symptoms, they don't have a common unknown illness. Now understand that some of these people were in the same household, or one person was a caregiver for another person, and they both came down with this stuff. How does that happen? Neurological issues are not supposed to be contagious, are they? So what is the pathogen causing this? Well, to me, this is a big cover-up. The Oversight Committee has unanimously agreed that we will all lie about, that these 48 people should never have been identified as having a neurological syndrome of unknown cause. And then based on the evidence reviewed, there is no syndrome. See how easily these people can just decide what the truth is and what's not? Public health concurs with these findings, but I stress again, this does not mean that these people aren't seriously ill, so they throw them a bone, right? It means that they're ill with a known neurological condition. The committee's review found potential alternative diagnosis for 41 of the 48 patients, including illnesses such as Alzheimer's, Lewy body dementia, post-concussion syndrome, and cancer. 10 of the 48 patients have died. The Oversight Committee could not conclude that the main referring neurologist had sought second opinions. So, here we go. Now, let's keep reading here, because it says here, the report doesn't mention this neurologist by name. Oh, wait, there's one patient. Oh, let's back up here. The Oversight Committee could not conclude that the main referring neurologist had sought second opinions for the patients before determining they may be suffering from an unknown illness. The report doesn't mention him by name, but Dr. Alier Marrero identified 46 of the 48 patients in the cluster. So here you have a hero doctor seeing that something's wrong, and now he's been discredited. Unbelievable. So prayers go out to the people in New Brunswick. If I was you living in that area, I wouldn't be eating any of the wildlife there. My theory is that it came from the air and somehow infected the wildlife. So if you're hunting, I mean, did they even ask these questions? Did they ask these people, did you eat any wild meat? I mean, what kind of investigation did they do is the question. Let's get into some of these other stories here. Oh, here's another article on it. This is from The Guardian. Victims dismayed as a Canadian inquiry finds mystery syndrome does not exist. Wow. They can actually look at somebody's brain scan and still say, there's nothing to see here. Move along. Now, let's talk about VidCo19, because this headline says, we need to think about VidCo19 Pokemon stickers we'll need in 3 to 5 years. Now here's what's clear to me about VidCo19. They are taking a break, but this is not over by any stretch of the imagination. Notice how fast the media dropped Vidco when this whole thing started going down in Europe, right? And notice how they started to announce the end of Vidco just before all this started happening in Europe. It was like it was all planned. So this lady basically says, okay, there's more fear on deck. Stay ready. The threat of new Vidco variants remains a focus for the world's leading public health experts, even as some wealthier and more Pokemon-stickered countries push for a return to normal. Now, we'll get into what happened in Africa a little bit after this, but this is nuts. Nobody wants to talk about Africa. So here, I guess, Gil Bates angered some experts over the weekend when he said it's too late to meet the WHO global rate of 70%, and there's no longer demand for Pokemon stickers. He added that with natural mooning of the city from the Skyrus, much of the African continent has a higher level of protection. Wow. You'll get over 80% of people have been exposed either to the smack scene or various variants, he said at the Munich Security Conference. Now, this is crazy because he's basically, Gilly Bates is contradicting the world medical consensus. And he's agreeing with theorists out there that when we said that when you get Vidco, it acts like a smack scene. He literally says that. Now I'm going to read this verbatim because I don't want to get in trouble here. But here are his words from that conference. Sadly, the Skyrus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of smack scene. He says it right here. It's a type of smack scene. That is, it creates B and T cell mooning of the city, and it's done a better job getting out to the world population than we have with the smack scenes. That means the chance of severe disease, which is mainly associated with being elderly and having obesity or diabetes, those risks are now dramatically reduced because of the infection exposure. What have we been saying for the last 2 years? And every time we say that, we get fact checked. Well, are they going to fact check him? I don't think so. Now they're saying it's because of Omicron and because it's different. But how much different is Omicron than any other variants in offering protection after you catch it, right? Now, many of us have been saying this all along, that it should be a choice if you want to risk catching it or you want to get a smack scene. So, this is what's going on. Our world is going insane. Now, some of these articles say that much of the world accepts natural protection. Most governments, with the exception of some, such as Australia and the United States, accept recovered status as a form of mooning of the city to VIDCO-19. That means if you've already been recently infected and since recovered, you are considered adequately mooning of the Zizos. You know the word. There it is right there. Now, what's the problem here? We're supposed to be the freest country in the world. You would think that we would err on the side of allowing natural protection, right? But unfortunately, we aren't as free as we thought we were. Because the U.S. is still rejecting natural protection as a replacement for the smack scene. What they've done is a travesty, forcing people who, need to work to have to get it. Schools, colleges, nurses. And to this day, our disease control center still won't concede infection as natural protection. So once again, we have an unqualified talking head that reveals the agenda, which is to scare everybody into the smack scene to make the most money for the pharma companies and downplay natural protection. And it's exactly what he did until now. And now they're only, I feel, conceding natural protection. They're only conceding that now because of the wave of the Skyrus. The huge bump is over. And they knew it was going to be over. And now they had to find a way to pivot away from VIDCO because they already met their objectives, which was to get a bunch of smack scenes and a bunch of people, right? It's kind of like snipers who slither out of a building through the back alley while the police come in through the front door. And they can never catch the sniper because they don't know how to cover all the exits. And they're always one step behind the sniper. He's already moved on to the next building to make his next move by the time they show up. Well, that's how humanity is in our mindset, our mentality. We don't even see these tricks coming. We accept the explanations given, we move on, but the damage has already been done. Now, here's what's happened in Africa. No smack scene virtually. I mean, what is it? 1 to 2% on average of all the countries got a smack scene. You didn't have mass hospitalizations. You didn't have mass deaths in some of these countries that only had 2% of the population smack-cinated. Heck, you would think that the world elite controllers would be talking a lot about Africa's success, wouldn't you? They'd be sending droves of scientists over to study what happened there. How did these people survive? How did they make it? They should have wiped out the entire continent. Right? There should be thousands of studies being done right now on this. How this happened. I mean, if you really, really, truly want to fight this spamdemic, wouldn't you take this as a case study and say, let's figure out what happened in Africa? How these people get by? But I wouldn't hold my breath because it's never about truly fighting something when you ignore the biggest white elephant in the room, which is an entire continent that survived. Now, this next story is kind of freaky. Twins who married other twins and had babies at the exact same time. Now, the first question I asked was, did the babies come out identical? Let's read this. Twin sisters who had first babies with twin husbands at the same time, debating if they'll have more kids. So look at this. This is a trip. Twins marrying twins, having babies at the same time. Did they come out identical like the parents? No, they didn't. I won't keep you guys hanging. But they did not come out like the parents. But they did make an interesting observation here. The observation is that these two daughters, I think one's a boy and one's a girl, maybe, they are actually closer in DNA than cousins. They're actually as if they were brother and sister. Now, how creepy is that? They're actually brother and sisters instead of cousins because of all the DNA. Let's read this. Every day is Tuesday for a Virginia family made up of two identical twin sisters, their husbands, who are identical twin brothers, and their two toddlers. Sisters Brittany and Brianna tied the knot with Josh and Jeremy Selliers in a joint ceremony at 2018 Twins Days Festival in Twinsburg, Ohio. You can bet these people they're probably involved in some studies, right? I can imagine. Scientists are very intrigued by twins. So, they were both expecting. Since then, they've led their lives, lived in the same home together while operating their own wedding venue location. Then they had these babies, and then it says down here that they're closer to brother and sister than they are cousins. Wow. Now, the rest of the week, let me go back into the chat here. We will be, I've already got some decodes scheduled, so hopefully you guys will set your reminders. You'll see them in your feed, hopefully. Set your reminders. We're going to delve into a 1931 novel called The Golden Calf. And this book takes place in Kiev, in StewCrain, and it seems to predict everything that's happening right now in Russia and the StewCrain. It talks about splitting up of the Soviet Union into pieces, just like what happened after, or just recently in history after the Cold War. Except this thing was written in 1931. There's even a Bo Mama element to it, revealed in iPad Goat 2. We'll cover that. Remember the part where Bo Mama's shoe is next to that coin? Well, there's a monument in the Ukraine. Now, we had covered this years ago. I had to look way back. It was like 2013. And this is called the Panikovsky Monument. This is right there in Kiev. And look at the shoe next to the coin. Now, underneath this shoe is a hand signal. Like, I guess you call it sign language. But it actually means something. We'll get into that. And this monument is of a guy who is the main character in this novel, 1931 novel, Panikovsky. Here he's pretending to be blind. We're going to read about all that as well. Talk about what that could mean spiritually. But it's weird that this whole shoe and coin thing appeared in iPad Goat 2 under Obama's foot, he was front and center in this whole StewCrain thing, and actually takes the credit for helping StewCrain become independent, quote unquote, independent. So then the following day, after this decode that we're going to do, I have another decode on an Outer Limits episode in which an artificial intelligence recreates extinct man in his own image. But then a rival faction of the artificial intelligence tries to prevent the second coming of man, they call it. So, lots to cover. And if you guys have anything you want me to decode, please just send me an email, but also be specific. Tell me the timestamps in the film, or give me a list of short things that you noticed, so I have somewhere to look, and then I can watch it and collect screenshots or whatever. But that's what we have in store for the rest of the week. I'm in the chat now. See what you guys are up to. Every day has enough of its own. Yes. Whatever happened to Notre Dame Cathedral? Yeah, that was in iPad Goat 2 as well. They showed it falling. I think we were the first ones to do a side-by-side of that image in iPad Goat 2 compared to the Notre Dame Cathedral, and showed it falling down. So, hey everybody. All right, I'm just reading through the chat here. Let's scroll back up a bit. Okay, Stephanie says, The headline, Russian invasion of StewCrain could cause polio. Wow. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at this thing. They're going to say whatever they need to say to put the people in as much fear as possible and make us feel so sorry for the people there, when really, compared to what we've done to other countries, is literally like Sunday school. So what else is going on? Well, they want us to donate to the people of StewCrain. You might as well just flush your money down the toilet, because probably most of that money is not going to get there. And it's probably, we already know the corruption going on there. Nobody wants to talk about it. The son of the president. Nobody's talking about all the corruption and millions and billions of dollars. We really think this is going to get to where it needs to get to? Likely not. Are they really suffering? Well, according to Russia, they said the infrastructure is still intact. That they haven't taken out these people's power and all this stuff. I don't know. We'll have to see. There are conflicting stories about that. According to StewCrain's president, he says that they don't have anything, and then all their grid was taken out. Guess we'll have to see. If you see lights on at night, there's lots of cameras showing lights on at night in the StewCrain, so it doesn't look like people lost their power. So, and then there's videos circulating of the StewCrain president, just really cringy music videos. I don't know if that's real or not. That's why I'm not showing it today. It's really hard. Sometimes these things seem completely real, and then you find out later, after you catch a strike, that they're not. So I'm very careful about talking about those kinds of things, or showing them anyway. We can talk about it. But there's some music video, and he's dancing around in like these leather tights with no shirt on. It's just really cringy. Really cringy. And then him playing the piano with his man parts. I mean, what is going on here? What is really going on here? So I'll let you guys find all that. A lot of it's on Telegram and other alternative sites that are leading with it. But I know that, I think Sandra has it posted on her channel. So you can go over to hers. I think she's here in the chat. I think she's still got it up. Hopefully they didn't take it down off of her channel. But you can see it with your own eyes. I think he's even in the credits of the music video. It's crazy. Let's see if she's in here. I don't see her. But that's what's going on, you guys. There's some really dark stuff going on in this world. Yeah, there she is. So yeah, go on Sandra's channel. I think she's still got it up. And it's a video of the president of the StewCrain in a music video that is just so cringy. It's like, I couldn't even believe it was real. So, all right, you guys. I'm going to pop off of here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Eric says share the gospel. I think we do that often on this channel. Talk about bits and pieces of it. There's different opinions about what the gospel is, you know, but if you want to read the gospel, it's there. I'd probably butcher it here on the channel. The best thing to do to read the gospel is to go to the New Testament and read the gospel. And that's where you'll get the full gist of it. Because I know that if I say the gospel, someone will say I left something out or I said too much, and then that will be used to try to take down this channel. Same way people say, why don't you ever pray on the channel? I don't pray on the channel because the Bible explicitly says not to be like the hypocrites and pray on street corners. And so most churches break this rule because they pray on a street corner. Every single time you go to church, there's a man standing up in front of the podium praying like a hypocrite. You're supposed to pray in private. So, yes, and Tom always puts the scriptures in the live chat. I don't know if he's still here. We started a little bit late. But we get a lot of help and support with the gospel here. So, I love each and every one of you guys. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And I love you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care and be safe, everybody.